Kirk, what's the whale watching update?
I mean, we don't have any whales floating onto the beach this summer yet, but on a clear day, you can see, those 50 or so windmills that don't seem to be moving. So that's the current update. There are whales still in the area, but not as many. And those that do find their way into the territory are being knocked offline by pile driving and surveying and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's unfortunate.
So is that project going ahead to completion?
I think the Trump administration actually green-lighted it again, which has made a lot of people upset. So you had sort of both sides of, Biden administration green-lighted it, Trump administration put a halt, and then they green-lighted it. So I'll get an update, and next week we'll talk about it. But a lot of people around here are really upset.
Are all those beaches back open
Yeah, they're all open. But I mean, we haven't had debris float on the South Shore in a while, but I'm sure it's still there. You just don't see it.
One blade.
Just one blade. One blade.
Crazy. All right, Mark, kick us off. What are we talking about today?
Well, I sent to run a show. No, I thought it'd be good to just address the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit that the president took the time to attend the other day. And importantly, one of the announcements that came a day after that summit was on Tuesday. You had Treasury Secretary, you had it was in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and the big headline coming out was $90+ billion worth of investment, either concept or committed. I'm not real sure how it all breaks down, but it kind of caught my attention in that. Why not Texas?
Yeah.
What are we doing? And keep in mind, Westinghouse is based in Pennsylvania as well. I think they've got a plan to build 10 reactors across the country. Obviously, EQT is there. And lo and behold, the EQT announcement that came out a day later was being the sole gas supplier to the, what's it called? The Homer City Giga Campus, which is at least nameplate on the announcement. It's a 3,200 acre site, 4.4 gigawatts of power, and EQT's got, I think, upwards of a BCF a day as the sole gas supplier for that. It's actually a conversion because that's the site of an old coal-fired generation plant, which obviously makes a ton of sense.
Now, I thought we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but I mean, Carnegie Mellon had to have been behind this summit, correct? I mean, let's say that some research institution said, hey, we want to throw our hand up and be known, blah, 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 to pull off a really cool energy summit. Where's Rice and where's U of H, Chuck?
Well, I think what y'all are missing is this is a swing state in 2028. This, Texas is going to redistrict before the midterm elections, try to pick up 5 more Republican seats. Texas really isn't in play. And so, I mean, the reason it was hosted in Pennsylvania, that's a swing state. There are going to be midterm congressional races to do, as well as prepping Vance and whoever for 2028. So I think that's why it happened in Pennsylvania. But you're right. I mean, there's no reason Rice University, U of H, A&M, Texas Tech shouldn't be doing this every weekend.
We talked about the Fermi, the Rick Perry led plan or project outside of Amarillo a few weeks ago. But, to get kind of a national spotlight on Pennsylvania, I really hadn't thought about the swing state aspect, but it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things Chris Wright said in the midst of all this, and between Wyoming and Pennsylvania, talking about minerals in Wyoming, and then in Pennsylvania, this notion of, look, we can we can generate a lot of cheap power if we do it on site where the gas is produced, is essentially what the message is. And, I think that's increasingly looked to as an accelerated solution because it's going to take a long time to build nuclear, co-locate. 3 Mile Island is obviously in the middle of this conversation. That's also coincidentally Pennsylvania, but it just makes more sense, particularly with the Marcellus. You don't, as Chris Wright said, you don't have to build a bunch of long haul pipelines and transmission assets, et cetera. You got the gas right here. We can pipe it, process it a short distance, and then use it in a big combined cycle generator.
You know what I think we should do? You know what I think the big story here is? If you look at the CEOs of in attendance, Darren Wood, Mike Wirth, Larry Fink from BlackRock was there, Dario Amade, or however you pronounce his last name, from Anthropic, Amazon Web Services had Matt Garman there, John Gray from Blackstone, all the Trump administration was there. Dude, we need to be taking a victory lap. 3.5 years ago, did we ever think that all those folks would be in the same spot, highlighting energy, talking about natural gas? This should be a moment for no complaints, no griping. Sure, they could have done things slightly different, a little better, highlight this or highlight that, but dude, look how far we've come, because that would not have, we were not talking this 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's, hopefully the spark of more momentum and certainly groundbreaking in areas that have these advantages. I think it sends a strong message to certainly New York and New England. Look, we're going to do something with this gas. Could have easily piped it into New York State, into Massachusetts, but we're going to do something that captures a lot of value and facilitate, building our lead in the AI arms race as a country, right? So I think, I thought it was a great event. I'd kind of snuck up on me, but President was leaving the White House the other day and headed to Pennsylvania, talking about other things, but yeah, I certainly a positive of moving forward.
Yeah, of how far we've actually come.
I mean, if the economics didn't implode, it was always a matter of time that economics would win the day, because the whole clean energy movement was such a push globally. I mean, think about what the Chinese have been investing for decades into building the infrastructure to pump out solar and wind and so many other things. You had the Silicon Valley West Coast Tesla movement, where electric cars are going to be brand new, and then you had all the big oil and gas companies like BP. What was it? 20 years ago, Beyond Petroleum and that whole green strategy, which failed. But this bandwagon has been a global movement, and I don't think it's wise to stand up against it by yourself. And no one stood up against it. But finally, now that we see that the subsidies and economics aren't working out, you're going to see people like Larry Fink, the guy of all people who was totally all in with clean energy, turn the other cheek and be like, hey, no, it's all about economics and cheap energy. So it was about time, but it's really hard to fight the global momentum. It's just really hard.
And I know we've said this before on BDE, but let's say it again, just so we're on the record for sure. I truly believe AI is such a game changer. We cannot cede the lead in that to the Chinese or any of our adversaries out there in the world. We truly have to be US technology companies have to be at the forefront of AI, because it's going to be such a game changer that in the wrong hands, I mean, this is Manhattan Project level stuff. I truly believe that.
Yeah, and for a glimpse of what it looks like militarily, just take a look at what Anduril's doing. I know we've talked about Anduril, but AI changes the entire profile of military engagement, military advantage, and power. So,
wait, what's that? Did you guys send me the link of that company, the defense company that has like microwave technology that if there's like a swarm of drones, it just shoots it in the air and all the drones like electronics fry and fall, like they're basically useless?
I think there's I think that was an Anduril demo. So you can go look that up on YouTube. I think it's out there.
Back in my Shell days, we looked at and almost invested in an electric airplane company. And look, technology's coming where there will be electric airplanes at some point. But I just thought, man, I do not want to be flying by one of those microwave machines, and all of a sudden I become just a heavy lead object in the sky. Not that it wouldn't do it to a regular airplane, but at least hydraulic engine, jet engines. Maybe the fuel will still flow into those things. Who knows? But
made me think of my first trip to Argentina on a hot barrel dove shoot when I saw that demo.
Yeah, no doubt.
Just to kind of button this up, I think EQT being front and center here, and then having that supply announcement the day after the summit, it's going to be interesting. We're about to kick off next week into heavy E&P earnings season, and I've been a little perplexed as to why there's not been more strategic conversation. So maybe paying attention to a few of these calls here in the next few weeks might shed some light. But it'll be interesting to see who's kind of me too. We know Diamondback announced that it was open for business with its gas and acreage out in the Permian, but clearly there's some things going on behind the scenes. But for the most part, it's been relatively quiet on this front, at least from the E&P sector. And eventually they'll heed Chuck's mantra.
I will say this: I had drinks last night with a prominent investment banker in the energy business, and kind of his story was February, right after the inauguration, they went and pitched 9 mandates for sale side stuff. Everybody was going to sell. Tariff talk happened, screeching halt. And it's kind of been in standstill ever since. And where it's kind of shaking out is tariffs aren't going to be as bad as we thought. So maybe that sort of stuff is up 10%, but day rates are going down because rigs are dropping. So it's actually cheaper. You're still just stuck staring at 65. So the economics aren't great enough to go get after it. So he thinks second half of this year, everybody's just gonna accept that as the reality, and deals will start pricing again. But it'll be interesting when you're listening to the earnings calls. What are D&C costs doing? What are thoughts on M&A? See if any of that stuff comes out on it.
Yeah, just a new twist, meaning tariff impact on an old question, which 20 years ago, there was always the obligatory, okay, what is inflation doing to service costs, and what are your thoughts on M&A? This is a little bit of a different animal, but the same theme.
Yeah.
But I'm mainly interested to see where the E&Ps are mindset wise and what they're willing to talk about. Is there a potential strategic pivot? Thinking about the power side of their, what I would argue to be underpriced or undervalued gas assets, particularly in the Permian.
Speaking of the Permian, take us to Texas pipes.
Well, the project pipeline, I don't know where I caught this article, but in the last 2 months, contrasting it with all the positivity in Pennsylvania, you've had 9 gigawatts of generation projects canceled. And, batteries and solar have taken the biggest hit in that chunk of 9 gigawatts, but natural gas is in there too. I think it's just a continuation of what we've seen as the pullback from the Texas Energy Fund we talked about a few months ago. And so tariff uncertainty and clean energy credit rollbacks are really, really chief factors there. And it's more of an ERCOT. And if I'm, for example, a natural gas fired generation project sponsor, what is my economic foundation? Am I subordinated to, renewable generation? Where do I ultimately fit on the stack? I think some things need to fundamentally change to really go after certainly the off-grid gas-fired generation or the power islands, which is essentially what's going to happen with this project in Pennsylvania. It seems to me like there should be a separation between project sponsors and just the entanglements that you get into both politically and economically by trying to play within the grid, whatever grid that is. ERCOT's obviously a unique example, but we have this huge endowment of cheap natural gas in Texas, which obviously drove petrochemical renaissance. Can do the same thing for power generation, but all of this entanglement, all of this inertia in the middle of the conversation, I just would have expected that we would be heading the other way in terms of really seeing a lot more projects getting to FID.
I mean, Texas has Waha gas. I mean, it's the cheapest in the U.S., and it's just sitting there like a loaded bazooka. I mean, why are we messing around with solar subsidies when we could be powering AI data centers with gas and nuclear? Makes no sense to me.
I mean, we're doing it, but we can do so much more. And I don't know you probably know better than I do, Kirk, but what are the logistical and technical issues with siting these giga campuses out in West Texas where what does the fiber hub look like? What are the limitations? But just from the basic reality of as you mentioned, super cheap gas and Waha, and that's not going to change structurally anytime soon because gas oil ratios in the Permian do nothing but go up over time.
So what's happening? I mean, Trump's tariffs and credit cuts, are those directly related to developers bailing on all these projects?
That, and so the rollback and the risk of rollback of IRA related solar energy, solar power tax credits, and then tariffs in terms of what it means for input costs like solar panels from China. I think on the natural gas side, it has more to do with, where are we in the hierarchy of generation? And so if I'm participating in both the grid and powering a data center campus, what does my capacity factor look like? What do the economics look like? Plus there's all kinds of mitigation that have to go along with that. And rightfully so, if you're in a EPA non-attainment zone, in particular for NOx and SOx. But, and oh, by the way, we've got plenty of CO2 storage capacity all over the state of Texas.
For sure.
It's just choreographing all that and appealing to, all of the constituents and stakeholders as you build out natural gas fired generation. It's getting done elsewhere. But, Texas has been, and ERCOT has been really the poster child for massive renewable build out. And again, subordination on the gen stack of traditional generation methods. So if I'm a new, fossil fuel fired generation project sponsor, what am I looking at in terms of my return risk, given all those those crosswinds? I won't call them headwinds, but I think they actually are.
I mean, I'm hearing from people that I talk to that the fiber optics, so kind of the telecommunications aspect of a data center, just doesn't matter. They can lay fiber optics cheap enough that that's not really the driver. It does come down to power costs and availability, and so I don't know why we're not building more stuff out there. Maybe we need to get the Mayor Monaghan's on and find out what he's hearing, kind of boots on the ground. We'll do a BDE from the Bennigans or whatever it is they've still got in Monaghan's where they make the Monte Cristo sandwich. But find out why he's not getting more. I mean, early days of data centers, it was around DC because the telecommunications, the fiber optics mattered. That's why you saw it kind of in and around DC. And then as it's moved out, you see a lot of it happening kind of Dallas, Abilene, Amarillo. But I don't know why we're not closer in West Texas.
I mean, if we don't get our act together in Texas, we're going to be that kid that is eating glue while Pennsylvania is doing donuts in the parking lot. I mean, we've got Waha gas, wide open land. I mean, ERCOT is begging to bail themselves out of their own stupidity. I mean, let's build data centers and make Silicon Valley cry into their kombucha, man. And let's do China who's boss. Forget Pennsylvania. I mean, let's just step up and lead. It sounds like no one can do it. And I'm actually blaming Rice University, Chuck, your alma mater, for dropping the ball. They're letting Carnegie Mellon take the lead.
There you go. Bobby Tudor, this is on you.
I mean, maybe Texas needs to legalize marijuana because if people smoked more, maybe they would have better ideas and play safe.
There we go.
Not that solar's safe. It sure doesn't work at night. So I don't know why that's safe. But
all right, if we have a BD listener that's well-versed in data centers, and maybe our guy Zane Ball, who used to be with Intel for all those years, came on the podcast about a year and a half ago. He left Intel in December. Maybe we can get Zane to come back on, and because he went to Rice.
Great idea.
Get him to come on and educate us on why we don't have more data centers in Monaghan's. I know a big ranch out there we could put it on.
There are more Aggie CEOs in oil and gas than anyone else. So why aren't the Aggies involved, Mark?
It's a great question.
There you go. So are we going to bash Chris Wright in this segment, or are we?
No.
Or okay, then
There's plenty of that going on EFT right now.
All right. So what's the Chris Wright update?
We're taking a bit of a BDE victory lap here. We've been talking about the IEA and its departure from objectivity over the past at least couple of years. And it really started or crescendoed back in May of 2021 when they published the ill-fated, infamous net zero by 2050, which essentially said for our base scenario, we should not spend any more money on future exploration and development. It all dovetails with the prediction that oil demand peaks before the end of the decade. But there's really been no one in the administration that has really called this out. You've had OPEC calling it out with their constant return fire of missives from the secretariat. But Chris Wright spoke on the issue. I forget what the forum was, but basically said the IEA needs to. We would prefer a reform back to the original model, but like we've done with the Paris Climate Accords, we've threatened to withdraw. Now, I think the U.S. withdrawing from the IEA ultimately is not the right answer, but to have the energy secretary, who obviously had had support and sanction from the president to come out firing on the IEA, I think is good timing, because the IEA, credibility and the reliance on their data has certainly eroded over time, because everyone knows that they've been more of an advocate, at least part of the IEA, mostly manifest in their executive director, Fatih Birol. And I'll just remind folks that in the entire history of the IEA, which started 50 years ago, an American has never held the executive director's seat. So if that comes out of it and we get a reformed IEA back to the original mission of being the best objective data and information advisor and supplier to policymakers, I think that's a big win. But I was just happy to see that, obviously the secretary listens to BDE. He's a longtime listener. The moment he got his opportunity, that he addressed one of our chief crusades that we've been about here for the last couple of years.
I mean, when COVID hit, remember the 6-foot social distancing, which was some child that came up with it. There was no scientific data to support it. So it was just some kid that basically didn't want to share his crayons. I mean, the IEA have been acting like a climate cheerleader, not an energy watchdog. So I think what Chris is doing, bravo to him, and bravo to BDE for calling this out. Mark, you said it years ago. But their whole no new oil and gas mantra is like telling a barbecue joint to go vegan. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I think this is just an adult playing amongst children. And Chris is just saying, I'm going to be an adult. We're not going to spend money here until you get your act together.
Y'all are way too harsh. They've always done a nice job of producing a marginally attractive holiday card. So, I mean, come on. They got that going for them.
Never misses an opportunity to tell us that we're wrong.
Exactly. You're correct.
Touché.
How's that?
I think I got taken off of that Christmas card list.
Yeah, probably so with all your rants. All right. Run us through the Gulf Coast refineries. What's going on there?
So you saw the SPR swap with Exxon for 1 million barrels was in the news probably a week before last. Kind of what's that all about? And I was surprised digging into it that it's a result of Exxon not being able to take crude feedstock at Baton Rouge refinery off the Mars system. Well, why is that? Because Chevron bought a new Gulf of, it's hard for me to say after decades of Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America well. That's a source of medium sour. And so they've had to swap into the SPR for 1 million barrels because of the zinc contamination caused by a new well flowing into the Mars system. And Exxon says they're not going to take any more Mars until they get the zinc contamination cleared up. And really what it points to is a larger inventory and supply issue. Well, where does a lot of the medium grade and sour grade come from? It comes from places like Venezuela, and let's not forget Canada. And so it really points to a structural problem where you have the cancellation of licenses on Ven crude, and then you have, the situation with Canada. We'll just leave it at that. And the reality of what the refining complex needs versus what we produce domestically on the crude oil side is something that I think just, throws into a bit more of the spotlight as to crude is not crude is not crude. And this is, when you think about it, this is one new well coming online, kind of screwing up an entire medium sour system. I've followed some of this and mostly the comments from X, and there's just a very poor understanding of how the whole crude to refining system works in the U.S., and particularly as it relates to the Gulf Coast. And just thought it was interesting because the SPR is involved. Why does Exxon need to need to quote unquote borrow from the SPR. Well, this is why. And a single well, created
It's
this
kind
kind
of
of
like
system problem.
running your car. Like gasoline basically is gasoline. But if you put, a cup of water in your gasoline and put it in your tank, it's bad things are going to happen. That's the same thing with refineries. They've tuned those refineries for that medium sour crude. That's their lifeblood. So if you get something come out of the ground that's vastly different, which by the way, oil is not just oil, those things can blow up. Bad things can happen. So I think that's a big deal. But my question is, who was the trading company that actually turned that zinc well on? I bet there's some traders laughing their ass off right now. They're like, hey, we're going to flip the zinc switch and we're going to go, we're going to go short on West Texas refinery capacity and we're going to make a killing. So I'd love to dig into that one.
I think I've told you guys this story, but back in the day, in the middle of COVID, somehow the Department of Energy got on a phone call with us here at Digital Wildcatters, and they were like, hey, we got to spend a lot of money, to prevent a global economic shutdown. What are your ideas for spending money? And we'll give Jake Corley credit because this was his idea. He said, why don't you spend all the money now to revamp all the Gulf Coast refineries so that they can take the light sweet crude that's the shale revolution that we're producing out in West Texas. Just bite the bullet now, do it. And that way we don't have to deal with Venezuela, et cetera. And they said, that's a really stupid idea.
I've always wanted it. It sounds so obvious to you and to me. But when I went and worked for Royal Dutch Shell, there's something that became completely obvious to me. Upstream and downstream, and the two don't mix. They hate each other. They're different people. They don't talk to each other. And they make separate decisions except at the very top. So it became clear to me that the refining people, the downstream people, they look at upstream people as if they have two heads and vice versa. So I'm wondering if that's similar in almost every organization where the two just don't mix. When if they did mix, it would be, let's retrofit our refineries to take in this sweet crude. I mean, in fact, Shell built a giant refinery in Pennsylvania to gas to plastics, which was a great idea. But you'd think just retuning some of the refining capacity on the Texas Gulf Coast would be an easier decision. But for some reason, these mega organizations just don't like to speak to one another.
I think that was John Rockefeller back in the day, and they told him to cut that shit out, I mean, they're right.
I will validate that. It was very much the case at Exxon, and the only reason I got out of my upstream bubble, and upstream is always the alpha in that relationship.
Hell yeah, dude. Downstream people are boring. They don't make money. They just keep the lights on, pennies.
I got assigned to the Valdez project where I got commingled with not only refining, but also chemicals and marketing, et cetera, and learned a lot about really the refining culture. And that's not unique to Shell is what I'm telling you. Mike Wirth is a downstream guy, and he's brought certainly a different cost mindset to the leadership of Chevron. But historically, what you've seen is CEOs that have spent the predominant part of their career as the kind of upstream king of the hill. That's just been...
Exxon doesn't have an upstream guy on the board these days. That was part of the Pioneer transaction and Sheffield's FTC stuff that Russell Gold made the big point of is, hey, you're doing half your earnings are from E&P type stuff, and you don't even have an E&P person on the board.
Hey, I mean, I've been saying this for literally over 10 years, but upstream has been way underinvested since then. they are not investing in exploration technology. Exploration in of itself it's easier for them just to buy. They're taking a downstream playbook to upstream, which is let's just go buy a barrel someone else found. Now, part of the reason is exploration has been Shell for sure. They've just had so many misses that they don't have the appetite. But I think that's been an underutilized skill. And especially as clean energy came into the playbook, investing in upstream, especially in exploration, was a huge no-no. But I will tell you a joke. I had an EVP, a Shell downstream guy. I won't mention his name on air. You can probably figure it out. But Shell downstream people, and I bet Exxon people are the same. They think their brand, they're the ones that tell you how valuable their brand is. Like our brand. And I was like, really? It's so your, retail locations, blah, blah, blah. They're like, yeah, people, they seek out a Shell station to buy gas from. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. People only go to Shell because it's the closest or the cheapest. And they're like, oh my gosh, you don't know anything about our brand. I'm like, no, you don't know anything about people then, because people don't give a shit the name on the gas retail station unless they're really nice inside and they have lights and so forth. But the gasoline, totally bullshit. These guys will go down to their grave fighting for how powerful their brand is, and people seek out Shell retail because it's the Shell brand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are crazy.
The only place I've ever seen, I worked on a downstream marketing engagement with Arco in LA back in the day, my management consulting days. And I held the same belief coming from Exxon, but Arco was unique in the LA basin, or in Los Angeles County in particular. They ran a cash-only model. They didn't have pay at the pump when that was really starting to take over the landscape back in the 90s. And I was stunned to learn that they did 2 or 3 times per site the average volume, yet their transaction per customer on fuel was maybe half or less, and it was all cash. And so how do you get the throughput, et cetera? But Arco had a real brand advantage. Of course, it was related to the nature of their cash customers and just the density in that market. But that was the only real case of distinct kind of retail brand and location advantage in terms of, commodity gasoline to fill up your car.
If you have a brand advantage, 60% of your stations would not be owned by single families, and your profit margins would be above 2%. Now, so.
First time I ever had to model downstream and marketing covering an E&P company was when I covered Murphy. And I was stunned to learn that I think 50% of their C-store profits came from tobacco.
My favorite stat, I had Jane Stricker on the podcast, and she runs energy transition for the Houston. I'm blanking on the name, but anyway, she's former BP.
Hetty.
And she started, Hetty. She started in the convenience store group at BP, and she said something to the effect of 1/3 of all your inventory is stolen, and probably 2/3 of that is stolen by your employees. That, it's just, it's impossible. So anyway, I'll go first on this and y'all get your response. The Epstein list, basically the Justice Department came out and said, hey, there's no client list. We're not going to prosecute anything. Nothing to see, move on, case closed. It's obviously caused a big uproar there. And, all the conspiracy theories are running wild. Trump's on the list. That's why it's being covered up. And, I think my 2 cents worth on it is, as much as they've thrown at Trump, impeaching him on a phone call where he released the transcript, the lawsuits where, basically the banks all got paid back, there wasn't a victim, this whole thing about paying hush money, covering up a campaign expense, which was the same thing Hillary Clinton did with the Steele dossier. If they really had the Epstein goods on Trump, I think we would have seen it by now. That's kind of been my take on the whole Russiagate thing. If there really was the PP tape, I think we would have already seen it by now. I can't imagine that they would show discretion towards confidential information and not release this, given everything else they've thrown at him. That being said, really bad things happened there. And if Congress wanted to do something about this, pass a law that says anyone that signed a non-disclosure agreement surrounding the Epstein case is free to talk without any sort of ramifications, because the victims need to come forward and testify. That's the only way you could have a court case brought anyway. And it's my understanding there've just been tons and tons of NDAs and lots of money, and that's really what's stopping it. What say you?
I mean, the biggest joke in this household, the biggest joke is when you ask someone from another country and people are like, oh, well, I don't want to move there because it's so corrupt. And they turn around and say, well, have you looked at the United States? I mean, the challenge is it's like a one-sided tennis match. They slammed Epstein and Ghislaine, whatever her name is, with full court press, 20 years for her, jail cell for him, and then they suicided him. But somehow the other side is empty. It's like they prosecuted the coach and forgot the whole damn team. It's like, oh, wait a minute. We have two people, all this evidence that they were trafficking and doing these things. But by the way, it's like the VIPs got a free pass to the spectator seats. Like all the people that were actually involved, there's no list. I mean, we all know it's too obvious. Of course there's a list. It might not be, hey, here's a list. It's, we have all this evidence, but somehow we're not prosecuting. It smells like fire. There is a fire. And I understand that we have one of the most corrupt governments of our history. And that's the reality. You just have, we don't like that answer, but that is too obvious. How did they get Epstein? How did they prosecute him? They had evidence. And you don't think people in those photos, they have photos, videos, documents. You don't think anyone's name popped up on that stuff? That's called a list. I'm like, let's just be honest. We have a corrupt government and they're real powerful, and no one should look or say anything, because if you do, they're going to go after you. And that's the fear. That's the scary part. That's my 2 cents.
And one thing I'll add to that is, it's not just Epstein. That's the whole history of prostitution. We always arrest the prostitute, we throw them in jail, and the Johns get off scot-free. And that's always been because the Johns are usually powerful people and have connections, and there is a two-tail justice system in America. Money buys you freedom.
Oh, Mark's being quiet. Mark's on the list.
Mark, you went to the island?
Tell us about it. It's not funny.
Yeah, well, fair, yes.
I think what you saw from both Kash Patel and Dan Bongino prior to them being part of this administration, and how aggressive they were on talking about it. And I believe, as you stated, Kirk, where there's smoke, there's fire. My hope is that they've bungled the PR on this, but they're being super careful about dotting I's and crossing T's, because if they have admitted to having all of this videotape evidence of abuse, and so if there are identifiable perpetrators in that, hopefully those cases and indictments are being built, in private and confidentially, so as to not, contaminate the ultimate case of the prosecution. I'm cynical. I don't think we're going to see that, especially when the president is out, calling it a hoax and mostly concocted by Democrats. There's just this weird, jumble of PR, and the rationale changes every time one of the politicians opens their mouth. I'm starting to dig in on Mike Benz has been out in the last week or so and has given some fairly lengthy interviews on podcast about the issue. I know he's been fairly consistent saying this all ties back to Iran-Contra, which is way long ago, but there's an intelligence.
I hadn't heard that threat. I hadn't heard that thread.
He's been saying it for a while. There's an intelligence dimension to all this, and so look, if there are national security things involved, et cetera, then I get that. But why spin up these PR messages that can ultimately be debunked if indeed these things are going? Fundamentally, I think that if the Justice Department and the FBI and the CIA have evidence of hard evidence of perpetrators, then those cases need to be brought. And I think this is something that, the majority of the voter base that supported this administration is not going to let go of.
Yeah. No, I think,
but
I think
I'm
that's
a little
probably
bit
right.
I'm hopeful that they're just being ultra careful so they have airtight cases when they do ultimately bring them, because otherwise, I get there are a lot of kind of ancillary charges that Ghislaine Maxwell went to prison on, but if she's in prison for trafficking, who did she traffic to?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're I'd be all for letting her come in and testify to Congress, although that's never going to happen either.
Yeah.
I mean, look, man, it's sad across the board. I don't care about the sovereignty of another nation. We are supposedly sovereign. So if it has anything intelligence, that's the thing about intelligence. Like, every time there's this mass conspiracy, it's like, well, the American people can't know this. It's bad for them. Like, no. We love to know the brutal truth so we can rebuild. The challenge is when politicians think, it's so bad, we can't let people know. It's like, no. We can handle it. It's you don't want to face the ramifications of us knowing. That's the issue. Same with JFK, Chuck. I mean, our own government did it. Our own government did it. And if we knew that, we'd be more skeptical, more libertarian, fighting for our constitution's over, by the way, because of this. That's the whole thing that I think the current administration doesn't realize is there's a list. Pam clearly saw the list. And whether that list was aggregated from a bunch of documents, I don't care. It's a list. But now it's like there is no list, nothing to see here. That tears the fabric of the Constitution. Because the Constitution doesn't explicitly gives powers to the government. Well, one of the things they can't hide from us is the fact that there's illegal stuff going on from our own government, then we should release that. Period, end of story. But hey, they're powerful and they'll do what they want. So nothing to see here, right?
Well, I commented last night. I try not to watch what used to be called cable quote unquote news shows, but it's more celebrity and opinion. And on the rota of Fox programs last night, every one of them except one, this was the Epstein story was a segment because it was, it was front page news. The Democrats were out talking about it pretty aggressively yesterday. And this fracturing of the Trump base, the Republicans that are taking a harder line here, and demanding that we get some disclosure. The only one of the primetime Fox shows last night that didn't touch it was Sean Hannity.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. No, I watched Gutfeld last night, and they chatted about it. So, yeah, be interesting to watch.
Gutfeld chatted about it. The one before Hannity, I guess Jesse Waters, and they talked about it on the 5. And anyway, the only reason I watched that is because there was no baseball on last night.
Yeah, of course, dude. Why aren't you watching the Open? I mean, I was up at 4:30 this morning watching the first tee time.
That's a good call.
So it's amazing.
So Scheffler only hit three fairways, and he's, one shot out of the lead?
Yeah, he's 3 under. I mean, what's so great about this is if you just look at the dark skies, and it's Ireland, people are wearing sweaters, but in many ways it reminds me of my golf game. I mean, you've got dark clouds, you got invisible targets, things that can hurt you that you can't see. It's amazing. It's so
all
fun
while drunk. All while you're drunk.
Well, I mean, I don't know about them, but I maybe.
It's the Irish.
It's the Irish. That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. They forget everything but the grudge.
Good seeing you guys. We'll do it again next week, and definitely want our whale report. Maybe you can shoot some photos, and we'll get it to Jacob and get him to cut it in.
Perfect. We'll do. Cheers, boys. Great seeing y'all.
See you, boys.
Good to see you.